Okay, good early evening to everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're pleased to be having this information session because we're going to be talking about returning to Washington, D.C. in the fall semester this coming fall for in-person Washington semester program. And it's been an interesting couple of years for all of us, and we're looking forward to getting back to what used to be the program. We have guests so first of all, let me introduce my teaching colleagues, Professor Karl Robbins and Professor Sonia Jarvis. Some of you probably know them already, but they're the engine that makes the program go in Washington, because they're in DC every Thursday and Friday during the semester to teach classes that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, that they'll talk about. Also want to welcome a number of students who were in the remote program that we had this past fall. I see that Andrew Bourne and Eric Markowitz are on. Hi, guys. And right now, I think that's it. Am I missing anybody from the program? And returning to talk about, so they'll be able to talk about the experience that they had this past semester. But we're also fortunate that Ben Stang is with us. Ben was in the 2016 program, right, Ben? I think 2016.
I think it might have been 2015.
2015, okay. It was the last time we originally had the program in the spring, and there was a year where we switched over and had it fall and spring, or spring and fall. Anyway, Ben graduated shortly after that, and he can talk both about the experience in Washington and also about the impact that the degree and the Washington semester program he feels might have had on his career, which he's a few years into, and he'll talk a little bit later. So I'm going to jump into the slides. Here's what we're going to talk about. Let me get right into it. Whoops, what happened to the program team? Whoa. Did I lose a slide somewhere? I apologize. The program team is on the phone, on the Zoom call, Professor Robbins and Professor Jarvis. And I'll ask them to speak shortly when we get to the classes. And Professor Jarvis and I have been doing this from the beginning. We've been partners in crime for, I don't know, 11 or 12 years now. And Professor Robbins joined us as soon as she joined the faculty, which was maybe the third class. So this is the crew that's been doing it for a long time. So overview, you've probably seen this. All this stuff is on the website. The idea is to live and study in the nation's capital, which is an interesting experience for a semester. You'll get to up close and personal, learn about what goes on in Washington, whether it's federal agencies, Capitol Hill. Washington names, there must be 1,000 at least acronym names. We should do a contest for the longest acronym, right? They're all over the city. They're nonprofit interest groups, and you'll also learn something about lobbying, which is a major activity. For some years, the classes were hosted by a law firm on K Street, which is the famous home of many lobbying firms, K Street. Each of you who will do it will participate in what we call an intensive internship. Why? Because it's 3.5 full days per week. at whatever organization you're interning with. You're registered for 12 credits. 6 of those credits are with PAF 9192, which is the internship course. That's got my name attached to it. And the other 6 are 2 courses that Professors Jarvis and Robbins teach in DC. And once we're back in DC, we'll be able to spend some time visiting places like the National Archives and the Kennedy Center and the Library of Congress. And once or twice we've been out to the Pentagon. I don't know if we'll be able to go back to the White House again now that there's a friendlier administration in place. We'll have to see. We've been to the White House though. Come on, page down. Here we go. There's the team. Okay. I don't think Michael Lewin was able to join us. Michael was my guru when I was starting this out because he's an alum of the college. His Master of Public Administration degree is from Syracuse University, but he's a terrific alum who cares a great deal about the school and has spent his whole working career on Capitol Hill pretty much. His last job on the Hill was as chief of staff for Senator Joe Lieberman from Connecticut. And Michael will participate and you'll get to meet him during the program. He just wasn't able to join us this evening. So let me quickly talk about the internship. Most of them are unpaid. That's just the way it is, the way it's been. It's not right, but nonprofit organizations, I don't blame them because they have enough trouble paying the staff that work for them and keeping the lights on. Government and Congress, a little different. AOC, actually, I had an undergraduate student intern with AOC last year in the Bronx, and she did get paid. So I guess if someone gets to intern with AOC, we can hope for some kind of stipend. The minimum, roughly 28 hours a week, Monday through Wednesday, full days, and Thursday morning until lunchtime. And then we reserve Thursday afternoon and Friday morning for the coursework and other school-related activities. And as I mentioned, here are the courses. And let me turn it over to Sonia. You want to go first and talk about your class a little bit?
Sure. Mine is PAF 9115. Political dynamics is one title. Another way of understanding it is intergovernmental relations. And I try to focus your attention and time on how do our 3 branches of government work, either in concert or in conflict, as well as issues between state and local governments and the federal government. So if we were talking, for example, about COVID, we'd have a lot to talk about. What did the federal government do? What did states do? How did cities react? And so as part of our time together, it's getting a very granular view of those issues of consensus and conflict. In terms of the readings, I try to be a little more conservative than I normally am. Instead of having you read everything in a book, I also have articles and speeches and other materials that show you how Washington really works at the granular level, on the daily level, and most importantly, how it affects the nation generally. So it's against that backdrop that I assign one midterm and then the final, but we also have various short exercises throughout the semester just to make sure everybody's on track and following along. I've been able to organized the Pentagon trips and a couple of the a couple of the White House visits. And so we'll try that again. But I've also worked with individuals at the Library of Congress and a couple of our major museums, like the National African American Museum is one that I hope we can take some time and go see. There's also the Native American Museum. You're starting to get the point. We could spend all of our time just going to museums, but we can't do that because we have to teach you how the government really works. And so it's as part of our overall effort, we're trying to give you as much of the Washington experience as possible. I also try and invite the class to join me at various musical events whenever that's possible. But we don't tie up your time outside of class. That's your time. I think that's a fair thing to say. So I'll stop there and kick it over to Karl Robbins.
Thank you, my colleague, and as Michael said, partner in crime here. Sonia lives in Washington. I commute down from New York, but I spent a good part of my career in Washington. And I teach 9615. I actually, thank you for putting it up there. I always forget the number of that class, but it's called Who Makes Policy, and it's very complementary to Sonia's class. The whole concept of the class is, yes, a lot of policy gets made in the executive branch, but what we want you to see with this class is that policy gets shaped in lots of places, some of it inside government, some of it outside government. And so the way it works is that everybody owns a topic, an ongoing developing issue. And it could be a domestic issue like healthcare or immigration. It could be an international issue like relations with China or Russia or Iran or proliferation or something like that. And you have to watch as it moves sort of amoeba-like every week. You know, is the key action that's sort of shaping the policy debate something that the White House said? Is it a poll? Is it something that's going on in a court? Is it something that's going on at a think tank? Because all of these things shape policy. Is it a new ad campaign that's on buses across DC? One of the wonderful things about DC is if somebody wants to sell a really expensive airplane, they literally buy ads the way you see like ads for oat milk in New York City. Well, you see ads for the Joint Strike Fighter on buses in Washington, DC, because the people who make decisions about that, those are the consumers for billion-dollar airplanes. So that's what the course is like. We also have speakers that come on Friday, usually. Sometimes they'll come during class hours, and then we'll have class on Friday morning. And Sonia and I get speakers in, and they're people who, Michael gets list of, they're people who help shape policy, and either from inside government or outside government. And they come and they don't just talk at you, they talk with you. And that is a good, fun part of it. It just depends on who's available. We can't guarantee we'll tell you, very far in advance who's coming, because that's also the nature of Washington. As you can imagine, right now, there's no way in the world we would be able to get somebody who's covering foreign policy to come and talk to us. But we do it because we work with our friends and we get them to come and talk to us, and it's remarkable how willing people are to come and talk with us. So that's what we do, and we love this. We really love this program. And the other thing I think that's sort of the takeaway is that if you guys are used to New York, which is an enormous town, and you never run into anybody on the street who you know. Washington is a tiny toy town. You constantly run into people who you know in Washington, and it's possible in a semester to really grab hold of Washington. And that's really what we want you guys to do.
Hey, thank you. While Carla was talking, I was bouncing back and forth among some of the guest speakers that we've had, right? There's Tom Edsall, the columnist for the New York Times, White House reporter for the Washington Post. These are amazing people. And you'll have an opportunity to meet with them. And they're because Professor Robbins and Professor Jarvis are so well respected in the community there, they're able to get top-notch people to come and share their knowledge with us, which is wonderful. Okay, thank you. So here's a few of the internship sites that people have done. We're up to somewhere north of 70 people who've gone through the program. And for those of you who follow through and apply, I'll share the complete list of internship sites, which is, you know, larger than this. Oh, thanks. But as you can see, on the government side, we've had people on Capitol Hill. We've had people in federal agencies, Department of Commerce, Health and Human Services. The MBDA is actually part of Commerce. But we have a Marxe School alum from the late 1990s, before it was the Marxe School, who's a permanent staffer of the MBDA, and she's hosted a number of students. And then nonprofit internships. You'll meet Eric later. He was at the Center for Civilians in Conflict. Andrew, actually, I didn't put it down here. I should have. Andrew was at the Brookings. He was our first Brookings intern this past fall. And these are a few of the other organizations where people have interned. Okay, let's go on to how do you get into this program? So you have to apply this month. You have to have completed 9 credits by the fall semester with at least a 3.5 GPA. So this is somewhat competitive. We're looking for our best candidates to do this program, and one of the criteria that we can use is GPA. So the question always comes up, well, I'm in my first semester now, and I'm taking 9 credits, but I don't have a GPA yet. We do the best we can to hold places open so that in May, when your grades come out, we'll know. And we try to be flexible about that. So that's the GPA requirement. There are some citizenship requirements. We've had international students in the program before. To intern or work at any federal agency, you must be a US citizen. You can't be a green card holder or on a student visa. You must be a US citizen. Interestingly, congressional offices, you can be on a student visa. And nonprofit organizations are pretty flexible about this, okay? Need to be available to move to Washington from August 22nd to December 14th, which is the fall semester, right? So that's the basics of that. Whoops. Cost, you're a full-time student, so you pay full-time tuition for 12 credits plus whatever fees there are. Housing will be provided by, that should be MSEd-HEA. This is from before we changed the name. Sorry, I'll fix it next time. Housing will be provided by the school with an organization that provides housing for students in Washington. So if you're accepted for the program, the housing will be taken care of. You'll be asked typically to put a deposit down once you sign your agreement that you're going to do the program, but then the school pays for it. You're responsible for the other expenses, which is basically your transportation to and from Washington. I haven't checked the prices recently. At one time, these were the prices of Amtrak and a bus from New York to DC, and then the Metro. I don't know, Sonia, is that still relatively accurate?
Relatively. Oh, wait, am I still muted? Okay.
No, you're on.
If you buy your Amtrak tickets in advance, especially as soon as possible, they're still giving breaks because ridership is not back up to 2019 numbers. So you can get right now a $80 round trip from New
Wow.
York to DC. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, that depends on if you do it at least 2 to 3 weeks in advance. And I would encourage you to do that. Get them in advance. You can always switch them if you need to,
Okay.
but that way you
Yeah.
save that money.
And a few organizations do provide a metro pass for the DC metro system, even though they're not paying you. And then meals and miscellaneous, who knows if this is the right number. Ben maybe can speak to it from 7 years ago, since he lived in DC for a semester. Okay, so that's that. So we'll come now to the actual experience. As I mentioned, Andrew and Eric are on the call. I don't know, did anybody else from the fall group join us? I haven't been looking. I don't want to leave anybody out. Here, let me look at the participants list.
That's who's here right now, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to here, let me show you. Whoops, get back to the slides. So here's Ben. This is kind of a quick version of his resume. Down at the bottom is his internship with pharma. He was the first intern to be paid because pharma, which represents the pharmaceutical industry, has a gazillion dollars. And they could afford to pay him a few dollars an hour for his labor, so they did. And one of the reasons I was anxious for him to come is Ben, when he did this program, he might have been the youngest student ever to do the program. He was in his first year out of undergraduate. We had a student this year who was also out of her first year of undergraduate, so I guess he's tied. And look at where he's been since. So the next one up is an internship that he did when he came back to New York. And you can see he was focused on healthcare, and he'll talk more about that. And then his first job was Community Healthcare Network, which he did for a couple of years. Then he spent some time as a program officer at the Helmsley Charitable Trust, which is a, $5 or $6 billion private foundation. It's in the foundation universe, that makes it among the top probably 15. When you think of, the Gates Foundation and the Ford Foundation at the top of the chart, when you have $5 billion, you're still on the map. And then recently, in January, he's taken a new position in Connecticut that he'll talk about. So I'll leave that up and ask Ben to unmute and tell us about his experience.
Michael, why don't you actually stop sharing so we can actually see Ben?
There we go. Thank you.
There I am. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Great to see you, Professor Robbins, Professor Jarvis. Happy to be here. So I'm Ben Sang. I participated in the DC semester in 2015. I graduated from the Baruch MPA program in 2016. So as Michael was saying, I came into the MPA program straight out of undergrad. I went to Binghamton. I'm like everyone and their brother with a psychology degree. I had a couple internships. I knew I, needed a little bit of work experience, so I was seeking opportunities basically from when I stepped foot on campus. I had an interest in health policy, but really didn't know where to start. So I was aware of the Washington semester. I attended an information session with Professor Feller, and he walked me through the program. And I basically just said, where do I sign up? So he helped me the whole step of the way in developing a list of potential placement sites. He looked through my resume, helped with my cover letters, and really helped me get a couple phone interviews. And one thing led to another, and I managed to get an interview with PhRMA, which is the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. So like Professor Feller was saying, that's the pharmaceutical lobby. And I talked my way into an internship. And My dad still tells me that I sold out for $15 an hour. We used to joke in the DC group that I was the liberal mole inside the walls of pharma, but it was really, really a great experience. Probably the most unique entrance into health policy I could imagine. Just to set the stage of when I started there, the big news was Gilead came out with a drug that cured hepatitis C, which is wonderful. That's what the pharmaceutical company is supposed to do. But it costs $80,000 for a 12-week treatment. So that's kind of what I was stepping into. I remember on a Sunday night, John Oliver did a segment really bashing the pharmaceutical industry. And I went in on Monday and there were protesters outside the office. And I'm just like an intern walking in with my lunch, you know? So it was a really cool experience, really like a quintessential DC experience. But so at Pharma, I was in their policy and research department. So I wasn't a lobbyist myself in any way, shape, or form. I was with the nerds in the back, really doing all the work, developing all the one-pagers and fact books and that kind of stuff. And the things I worked on then and the skills I developed, I definitely still use today. Really what I learned to do is frame an argument, and I learned to do that from some of the best people in the business. As far as the classes in DC, Professor Jarvis and Professor Robbins teach real world classes. As they were saying, it's really following current events. They give you a long leash to really explore what you're interested in. So as you could guess, I was covering healthcare for pretty much everything I did. Was doing a lot of like policy memos. Basically, Professor Robbins would say, here's the structure on how to do a policy memo, come back in a week with what you can do. And my writing skills definitely improved through that. She's a tough but fair professor. My writing skills definitely improved. Living in DC was amazing. I don't know if the housing is still through Wish, but my apartment was on Capitol Hill, which I definitely couldn't afford to live in back then, probably still couldn't now. You're there for 4 or 5 months. You're there with a cohort of classmates. You hang out with them on the weekends. As Professor Jarvis was saying, DC is really a small town. So I remember we ran into Ben Crump, who was a famous civil rights lawyer, once at a bar, and we got a picture with him. The site visits on the weekends were really cool. A few of us took a day trip to Alexandria, Virginia once. That was pretty fun. And I played college rugby. And then when I was there, I'm like, I'm here, I might as well find a rugby team. So I joined a men's rugby team. So I had a group of DC friends too while I was down there. So you're there, you're in it. The whole opportunity is really wonderful. Just to quickly run through what I've done since then. So towards the end of the DC semester, Professor Feller asked what I had planned for the summer, and I told him I was interviewing at this place called the New York State Health Foundation. He said, well, what do you know? I have an old student who was one of the first employees there. So he put me in contact with him, had a call with him, and then I ended up getting that internship, did that for a year. Then I got my first job at a fairly qualified health center, which for folks who aren't in the healthcare community, it's really integrated healthcare in medically underserved areas. And it was the best first job I could have asked for. I was basically a grant writer who worked way outside of his job description. And once they found out that I was capable, they gave me all sorts of work, and I was managing multi-million-dollar contracts pretty quickly. So did that. And then I went to the Helmsley Charitable Trust, which Professor Feller was speaking about. It's actually an $8 billion foundation now. COVID did that. But I was overseeing a $20 million grant portfolio focused on type 1 diabetes. We called it Modernizing Healthcare. So really looking at addressing the endocrinology shortage, especially in medically underserved areas, funding a lot of research studies on telehealth, programs to upskill primary care providers, things like that. So during that time when I was working at Helmsley, I moved to Connecticut. I miss New York City, absolutely, but life is definitely easier now. And I'm working at a group called Social Venture Partners Connecticut. I'm their director of healthcare workforce strategy. Basically, I'm doing government consulting for an agency called the Office of Workforce Strategy that's charged with overseeing workforce development programs across the state. And I'm specifically working on their healthcare workforce programs. So I've been here for a couple months. They're keeping me busy. I really like it. But it definitely all ties back to the DC semester for me. That was the launching point of my entire career. I really don't think any of this could have happened without it. And it opened a lot of doors that probably would have been closed if I tried to navigate it myself. So I'm super grateful for the program and will always speak highly of it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ben. And he's done all this before his 30th birthday. So just to give you a taste, an idea of what you can accomplish. And he's worked hard at it, no question, but I'm sure all of you are hard workers and you can look forward to similar success as you go through the program. So Eric and Andrew, you want to comment on the more recent stuff that you've done at the Center for Civilians in Conflict? Very relevant organization right now, and Brookings, which is always relevant.
Yeah, sure. So I sort of did the Washington semester a bit backwards. I did my thesis before I did the Washington semester, and the reason was that COVID canceled the previous cohort. So my thesis was written on peacekeeping in sub-Saharan Africa and protection of civilian stuff. And using that, I was able to get an internship at the Center for Civilians in Conflict with much help from Professor Feller. I suspect I drove him a little bit crazy over the summer. I think I set a record for what was it, Professor Feller? I was the latest internship you ever had, or something like that.
Well, yeah, but you had multiple offers, so that kind of
yeah.
Right.
Fair enough. So yeah, there was a whole Afghanistan thing going on in August, which delayed a lot of it because Center for Civilians in Conflict was in Afghanistan at the time and was evacuating their workforce. Anyway, so while there, I was doing a lot of research assistant type stuff, a lot of literature reviews of topics like do no harm, which was pretty interesting. Counterterrorism in peacekeeping context, which is a real hot button topic in the field. I was doing a lot of coverage of meetings. I got to sit on a couple of meetings with country delegations, which was really interesting. So like Brazil, for example, I got to take notes for that. I helped put together some research that's going to be used to inform their sanctions compliance guidelines, which was pretty neat. And overall, it was a really interesting experience. And because it went so well, they want me to do some research assistant work for them this spring as well, which is great because that's a real starting point for a career in the field. And on top of that, I suspect that the quality of the internship and the Washington semester program helped me get into the Presidential Management Fellowship program. I suspect without having that sort of thing on my resume, they may have overlooked me. So the Washington semester is a really great opportunity, and I would take full advantage of it. My only regret is it wasn't in person, but we made the most of it for sure.
Thank you, Eric. Over to Andrew.
Yeah, I thought that without the Washington semester, one, I probably wouldn't have pushed myself to apply for an internship, let alone had Professor Feller to read my many cover letters and give feedback and get ideas as well from Professors Jarvis and Robbins. And I ended up getting an internship at Brookings, which was a great experience. I worked on the infrastructure team, which was wild because they passed a really big infrastructure bill when I was there. So who knew? It was a pretty exciting time to be doing infrastructure, but it was a really good experience. Brookings does pay, which is great. And I got to write a lot. I got my name on a few blog posts on the Brookings website, which has been super helpful applying to jobs in the future. And I'm currently interning with a nonprofit in San Diego that's working on climate change policy there. That was founded by a Brookings alumni that I, networked with during my internship. So as everyone has said, the program is super helpful for finding jobs and more internships afterwards. But yeah, it was all around a great experience. And one piece of advice that I got from Brookings interns that is probably relevant to all of you Washington semester or otherwise is if you want to, oh, thank you, Professor Robbins. If you want to work at a think tank, follow some of their scholars on Twitter and engage with them. Because it seems like half of the interns that I talked to got their internships by doing just that, or like, you know, engaging with the scholar and reaching out. So Washington semester or no, if you want to work at a think tank, that's my 2 cents. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, Carla, do you want to talk briefly about that piece of the think tank world? We've also had a couple of students, not recently, who interned at the Center for American Progress. And these are, you know, competitive, very competitive application processes. And I know Professor Robbins is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, where we haven't had anybody yet. But you want to say a word about, because what the point Andrew made, I didn't know until Carla told me, you really need to impress the fellows because they're the ones who get to pick.
It depends. I mean, the council, actually, the research assistants pick, much to my dismay. So I think the most important thing is that you guys have to figure out where you want to intern, or at least where you imagine you want to intern. And you've got to do the work. Professor Feller is an absolute wizard at helping you in this and preparing you, your resume, your letters, how to go about it. And yes, he's got incredible contacts, but it's really competitive out there getting great internships. And our students get great internships because we have great students. But we are requiring you guys to do the work, which means, as you'll see in the application, we require you to identify places you want to go. We require you to figure out what the deadlines are and what you need to do. And one of the challenges of this process, which drives Professor Feller insane, is that September is coming very closer, the end of August is coming closer, and each one of these think tanks have different deadlines. So, you're going to have to sort of master Washington from a distance to see, what it is. Now, one of the things you're going to want to also do is talk to Professor Feller and Professor Jarvis and to me about, and to former, Washington semester people about which think tanks are great to be interns at and which are less so. And you have different experiences in different places, and we can talk to you about it once you've identified places that you're tempted by. I mean, I think Andrew had a great experience, didn't you? I mean, you wrote blog posts and developed you're writing your capstone on the topic and developed a real networking set. And Brookings is a great thing to have on your resume. The same thing with Eric, who ended up going a place that just perfectly matched what he did. But sometimes you might end up someplace you don't expect and also develop a new passion. But the real thing right now is for you guys to identify where you think you might want to go and throw a pretty wide net. And then we can talk to you and also direct you to other people who can tell you more about the experience of working there.
Thank you. Let me just go make sure that I covered all the slides. I think I have. Oops. Yeah, so here's you can look us up on the school website for our email addresses. My cell phone number is there. You can text me. You can call me, although I won't have you on my contact list yet, so I might not answer. But you can definitely text me if you have questions. We can set up time to talk. And then for kind of the administrative details about everything else, Diana has been involved with this program from the beginning and knows it quite well. And she's available to answer your questions on housing and finance and things like that. And I believe, yeah, that's the end of the slides. So with that, let me open the floor to questions. You want to raise your hand? I'll recognize people as I see them. I think I have all the icons on my